Course development. I think the biggest thing when we were developing the course is dealing with the delivery of a lot of content and making it as clear as possible. When Kabi Neopani and I first ran this course, we tried to make it as student friendly as possible. We put up all the information up using the tools and things like that. But students weren't really sure what to expect on a week-to-week basis. They had to click on the schedule tool to go see what the schedule was. Then they had to go to the assignments tool to see what the assignments and the quizzes tool. And things sort of ran and bled in between each other. Again, I think the idea was to give lots of time for them to do the work, but then it just started getting very confusing, and we felt we were doing a lot of answering housekeeping type of questions rather than dealing with the content, and a lot of students found that very frustrating. So when we redesigned this course, we made it somewhat modular, so to speak, where students know what to expect on a week-to-week basis, and then we use the web content tool to make our own homepage. So on the homepage, we tried to make everything nice and accessible. Syllabus, all the basic information is there, including a welcome and contact information if they at the beginning if they want to know about us, myself, and then very clearly is a schedule, right? So module 1 covers chapters 1 and 3, starts on January 11th, ends on January 19th. So it's all there. When they click on these various modules, they'll be directed to the PowerPoint and lecture notes, as well as what the basic learning objectives are for the module, and then some animations that they can access to for enrichment. And then we also have an animation guide that helps them direct what to look for within the various animations, right? So this is the animation entitled Bacterial Diversity, a little bit about what it is, and then maybe some questions to just kind of think about as they're going through the various animations. How do I go back? The other thing that we figured out was that rather than copying our course over every single time, what we ended up doing was distributing everything in our workspace. So we go to My Workspace, and then we made a folder called Micro 130. And then if you go to Actions and then Edit Details, we can make this whole folder public. So it's publicly viewable. So now what we do, or what I've done since, is just throw all my stuff on here. So there's my lecture notes, my PowerPoint files, podcasts that we incorporate every now and again, various animations. Everything is found on here. And then every semester, all we do is update our homepage, change the dates, and then everything kind of links to the file. So this way, if anything ever changes, I don't have to change everything. I change the one file in my workspace, and then I'll know that every single file or every single course after that will have the updated file. And it makes it a lot easier from semester to semester rather than having to copy the whole course over. That is, of course, only if you're comfortable with people finding the stuff, right? Because it is public, anyone can find it. But the way we reason it is that the URL at the top, so for example our PowerPoint files, is somewhat convoluted and difficult to find. So it's not something I think that is easy to find. So it's not something where anyone can just go ahead and find accidentally. So you'd have to go and accidentally find it. And at the same time, if someone finds our PowerPoint slides, then I'm not too concerned if someone reads it. It's good for them, good that they learn something. Okay, I think that's it. F10. So on a week-to-week basis, we try to keep it as simple and as consistent as possible, in the sense that every week students know what they're doing. So every week there's one quiz that they can access a number of times, 3 times specifically, and as well as an assignment. So I think we found that students are comfortable with that. They like to, at least the microbiology students, they just like to come in and do their work, and not too many of the other stuff. So to get the material that's required, the lecture material, so to speak, they click on the module, and then they can access the PowerPoint file, and then they can then read through the PowerPoint file, which is basically a condensed version of the textbook. And then while they're doing that, we have the lecture notes, which start off with the learning objectives and that they can print out, but also gives them the notes from the PowerPoint essentially with blanks in them. So this makes reading the PowerPoint somewhat of an active process rather than just reading and reading. They get to fill in and try to simulate a classroom type of environment, and so they can fill in the information as they're reading it, and then with the idea that if they're writing down the information, at least in part, it helps them with the learning of the content that's being delivered. Another part of the course involves discussions. So we found the first time around the discussion board isn't really frequented that much unless they are have had questions about where to find stuff and just the process. So what I do now is have regular discussion assignments. So for example, let's go to this one here. And it'll just be on any type of topic where we have an assignment, they read through it, and then they give just a short little discussion based on, oh, this one's kind of long, based on whatever they want to do. So in this case, this was an exam reflection. Kind of highlighted how the first exam wasn't scored all that well, and then reflect on what they did, how they can maybe improve their performance for the next one, right? So get them to explore how they prepare for this exam, and then get them to maybe work on what they can do to improve for the second exam. What are some of the things that changed? And if any student did well, they can share with the class what they did, and if any student did poorly, they can maybe try to improve what they did. And it seems always the biggest thing is just keeping on task, not waiting till the last minute to do stuff. So I like to use this discussion as a way to get them to realize that maybe the way they're studying isn't working, and if they want to do well, they really need to relook at how they are dealing or learning the content, so to speak. The other thing I do with these this what I call discussion assignments is that I don't announce when they come. I post them up just unannounced, and usually within the middle of the module rather than at the beginning. And I do that on purpose, so then I get the students to check the discussion board. I want them to come check it. I tell them check at least once before or after you log in or log out. So then they're not just looking for mine, but they're looking for any type of discussion being posted. So I want them to go check the discussion boards regularly. And another thing that we have is, and somewhat of a big keystone project, is the disease profile assignment. So one where it's a group-based project where they go and describe a disease together, and it all culminates into presenting a PowerPoint poster. Let's see. A PowerPoint poster that they created about a project and they do as a group. So I don't have any examples now, at least for this course. But it is a group, so I like this because it's a group project. It's a group project, and they get to work together and then actually profile a disease. And they learn some new things, learn about how to collaborate with each other, learn about how to communicate electronically, and learn about how to, we use PowerPoint to make a digital poster, and I think that's new for a lot of the students. So it incorporates a lot of the things that is important for them, I think, after they leave. A, learning how to work with others, and B, some of these skills that maybe you don't really work on very much within school. And the last thing, well, I guess a couple other things about delivery is, I lost my page, is this Laulima how-to that I've done on here. So this is one way that I like to, I guess, deal with some of the tools of Laulima. Not everyone's familiar with it, so I made these little videos where they can access, and it's right here on the left side, and they can access it if they're not sure how to use the announcements, how to use the discussion board, how to use assignments, tools, quizzes. They can go on here, very short, these things, usually about no more than 5 minutes. They take a quick little see how things are being done, and then it shows them Let's just kind of go through one. It shows the students how to use.
Moving on, let's talk about assignments. The way I prefer, I guess the way I recommend
That's kind
you
of loud. Okay,
do
so it
the
shows them
assessments
how
each
to use
week
the tools, and I
is
always
do
like
the
to start from
assignments
the
first,
homepage, and
and
um,
then do the quizzes, because
it's always.
assignments will
I
help in
think it
some of
makes
the
it easy
quiz
for them to
questions, and they
see
can,
how some of these
I
tools
guess you'll
work.
see.
Okay, we'll turn this off. And the last thing is, I guess to kind of highlight it here, but I use this program called Camp Studio to make what I call mini tutorials for some of the more challenging subjects. And this kind of came about from one of the assignments in the past where it's not that difficult if I could have explained it to them. So let's go to one right here. Certain things, for example, the transcription and translation of DNA to protein, is not all that difficult if I can explain what needs to be explained. But reading it in a textbook, it can make it sound very complicated. So I use the program to deliver, again, what I call these mini tutorials. And then I post it on YouTube. And then they can, oh, good. And they can kind of follow along and then watch how I do it. I show them how to do it in action. Let's move forward just a little bit. And then they can we follow along with the notes, and then I use a writing tablet to scribble on there, kind of show them what's important, and then just the basics of the problem. So then this way, rather than looking at the problem and not really knowing where to start, I just show them, give them the basics of how to start, and we walk through it together, so to speak. Interaction and collaboration. One of the things that I really try to get the students to do is interact more online. I think I wasn't too happy with our past performances of the online class where everything seemed to work in a bubble. We throw out the assignments and quizzes, things seem to get done, and then we don't really hear from the students, and the students definitely don't hear from each other very much. So in order to do that, I guess the first thing that was introduced was the group project, which I mentioned earlier. So that was one way to get some sort of interaction between the students. We use the manage groups tool, and then we form group-specific discussion boards. So just to recap, I guess the disease or the group project is profiling a disease. So all the students choose their disease, and then we form these group-specific discussion forums that allow them to communicate. And some of them don't choose not to use it; they would rather text message each other or call each other, and some actually meet. But for the most part, they use these discussion boards to share their ideas, and then they can attach files, they can share any submissions, anything that they've written, and then edit and deal with each other. And this thing runs all semester long, so these people within the groups are communicating with each other all semester long. As mentioned with the discussion assignments, I try to encourage the students to discuss with each other. And one of the things I prefer to do is when they ask me questions, I post things online. So for example, at the beginning of the course, I tend to get people emailing me. So they'll email me a certain question. So rather than me answering via PM or email, I'll post it on here. And then rather than me answering, what I like to do is I prompt the class to answer the questions themselves. Right? So then rather than answering right away, I'll just kind of leave it, let it sit around for a day or two. And then I get answers back from other students eventually. And then, this eventually leads to, and doesn't always work, leads to others helping each other without me having to prompt. Uh-oh, I lost it. So for example, if you go to this one here, some student had a question about, no, was it in this course? Anyways, I think you get the point, right? Nope, I lost it. Okay, but anyways, you get the point. So eventually the desk get to a point where the students are asking and then answering questions themselves without me having to prompt. Oh, and I start the course off by letting students introduce themselves to sort of build a feel of community in a sense. I like to get to know the students, and I like the students to get to know each other as well. So one of the things that we do is we introduce ourselves a little bit. So I introduce myself, and then I get the students to introduce themselves, and I give them bonus marks if they upload a photo or some sort of avatar that represents them, right? So sometimes they put in individual faces, sometimes they put their whole family, sometimes they get pictures like this. But the whole point is that we can then identify, we can put a face or picture, so to speak, with the students. So when we're interacting, we sort of know what they look like, or at least we know that Natalie has this graffiti kick going on. Um, okay. Course design, learning materials. As mentioned before, one of the things that we really tried to stress was making sure that everything is accessible, everything is clear. Students really know what to do on a week-to-week basis, and it takes a little while initially, I think, but they do get, I guess, trained, so to speak, on what it is that we expect of them from most weeks. So that, again, using the web content tool, we made a homepage to show both the schedule as well as deliver all the content. So the schedules are clearly on here, including the various disease profiles and exam dates. So just by looking at the homepage right away, the students know uh, what module they're on, what they're supposed to do. The syllabus clearly shows. Change the color scheme to last weekend. Keep the, let's keep. The syllabus clearly shows what it is that we expect of them on a week-to-week basis. It tells the quizzes, assignments, exams, the fact that they have to take their exams at testing centers, the disease profile project that is group-based, all these discussion assignments, as well as links. Where is it? Links to whether they should be taking an online course. And I like to present this before the course itself, right? So it's an online course. It's right for you. They can click that. It's a short little quiz. I think this is on the EMC website. And then they can, I guess, determine for themselves whether they should be taking an online course or not. So I like to present that because not all students, some students think that they like the convenience of an online course, but it takes a certain dedication, a certain responsibility to be able to do it. um, Once they accept, once they do everything, one of the things that one of our first discussion assignments, excuse me, is an acknowledgement of the rules, so to speak. So we have what I call the Micro 130 pledge, and all I want them to do, and it's 5 points, very easy, is say that they've read the syllabus, they've watched the Laulima tutorials, and then they know what their responsibilities are on a week-to-week basis. Um, and then all they have to do is say, I've read and understand. All right, so then now by saying that, they get 5 points easy. But they also are accepting the responsibility of keeping on task, making sure to check schedules, making sure that they're staying on top of things. And this is the first time I did it this semester, and this is the first semester that I've not had anyone say, I didn't know that these things existed. I wasn't aware that we had to do this. So there's no excuses for that. Everyone knows what they're supposed to do, and it's very basic. Again, nothing changes from week to week, with the exception of exam weeks and our assignment due dates. As far as the material, as far as the material is concerned, it's basic content. We're a content-heavy course, so they have their PowerPoint where they see all the content, helps with dealing with the textbook, and then the lecture notes that helps them take notes while they're reading the content, so it makes it a bit more active. Plenty of animations for people who need to see things more visual type of learning, as well as the Camp Studio / YouTube videos that we throw up. And again, it just helps them see the same material from, I guess, in a different way, a different perspective. Okay. learning outcomes, and assessment. Um, for the most part, this is a pretty basic, standard online class in the sense that each week students are expected to perform a quiz and an assignment, and that's part of the weekly basis. The quizzes are drawn from a pool of questions, and we allow the students to do 3 attempts at the quizzes to see as much of the pool as possible. And we only keep the highest score. And part of this is to ensure them to, go back um, and I guess see the material as in many ways as possible by going back and looking at the quizzes. The assignments are more designed to apply some of the material. So where am I? Oh yeah, okay. So the assignments, for example, this one here is rather than memorization or just regurgitating what was learned. We try to get them to apply the information a little bit. So this one's a favorite of ours where we give them a piece of DNA, and then their job is to then figure out what the protein sequence will look like. So you can't just do this um, by being able to recite what transcription and translation are. You actually have to be able to do it, right? And every week there's a quiz and assignments. The discussions. Oh, sorry. So the disease profile project is also one where I like them to. I think they gain a lot out of the disease profile project, and a lot of them, even though they feel like it's a lot of work because they have to collaborate, and sometimes that can be frustrating. I think they learn a lot about how to collaborate electronically. It always starts a little rough at the beginning when people aren't communicating or they're not keeping up with deadlines. When they see a deadline of, let's say, a Sunday night submission, they'll start communicating with each other Saturday and kind of expect, oh, that's a day before, it should be plenty of time. When in reality, it takes time for things to turn around, right? So if you want feedback on something, you can't submit it the night before a deadline and expect to get feedback. So these things kind of come out as the course progresses, and they learn how to deal with each other. They learn how to make sure that communication is nice and prompt. And then as well, once everything gets submitted, they also learn how to communicate the research to their peers, right? Because it's important that not only that you know various materials, that you know content and stuff, it's also that you're able to communicate clearly what you need. And a big exercise in the project of making a poster is that you can't just throw on everything that you know, because once you start writing down everything that you know, it starts to become very cluttered and the message gets lost. So it's important to then take the research that you've done and write it in such a way where it's clear but concise. And that's somewhat of a challenge, and that's one of the things that they gain out of doing a project like that. Okay. Assessment and learning outcomes, part two. Um, so one of the things that I guess when we're assessing is try to we or I provide feedback as often as possible and as quick as possible. So for the assignments, because I feel the assignments are important for understanding the content, I grade the assignments as they come in, and then I don't just grade and give them a grade back. I make sure I give them comments. So if everything is done well, I'll let them know that everything was done well. And if things were done poorly, I let them know not just that it was done poorly, but how it was done poorly. And then, again, rather than just telling them what the right answers were, I like to point out where they can go to find the correct answers. And then if that still doesn't work out, then I always encourage them to come talk to me. With regards to the disease poster, we have a so-called um, e-conference where where the students share their posters with the class, and then the students give peer evaluations of the other posters, and then they give it somewhat of a score, and then it culminates with me adding up the tallies, and then I hand out these virtual medals. So I'm going to go to a course that I did last semester, and I asked the students to go and read the posters. Let's see, peer evaluation. To read the posters, and then give me their three favorites. So then, and let's see what else, and what they learned about it, right? So their three favorite submissions, why you like it, when what about the elements of the poster you like, as well as what you learned about the disease. So then they'll give me their three favorites, and then a little bit about the diseases, and in this way they get to see, well, at least three. I'm hoping they read them all, but they see at least three other diseases and learn about some other diseases. And then, I mean, again, the idea behind this is that they see what other posters look like, what they don't like about it, and then kind of uh, they see how other people do what they just did, right? So there's always different ways to do the same thing. And then just for fun, I announced the winners, right? In third place to one. So they all get these little medals. Uh, this is worth nothing, but it's kind of a fun thing where I think that it seems they get some sort of feedback, they get some sort of validation of what they've done, especially the winners. Course design. Um, so the way I laid out this course is that everything is very student friendly. It makes it I like to use the web content tool to make it a web page, and this gives the student a somewhat familiar look, like they're browsing through a website rather than a standard, um, just rather than just being text-based. We made these little icons with the help of Barbara Hoda. She helped us make these little icons that we put up there, so everything's icon-based where they click, and then the schedule is pretty clear. It's right on here. I don't use anything hardcore. I'm not an HTML person per se. I use Microsoft Word actually to make this, and you just save it as a web page, and it just kind of comes out like this. So it didn't require any knowledge of HTML. Just kind of this is what I wanted the page to look like, and so I laid it out on Word the way I wanted it to, and then just hyperlinking, and that's about as complicated as I get. Um, and then by clicking on things, we have various other web pages for that to get them to things again where everything is as somewhat icon based, and then they have access to the PowerPoint, which again is visual content, and then the lecture notes, which I like to say is somewhat kinesthetic in the sense that they're writing down the lecture notes rather than just simply passively reading. Lots of animations for the students to access, and then with the animation guide, it helps them to know what it is they're supposed to look at. So you don't just have to look at everything and know everything about every animation. Just what are some of the important things, and what are some of the things to highlight or think about at least while students are looking at the animations. The other thing that I do is that I made this with the Laulima how-to. It helps the student access the course. Some of the tools, again, if they've never really used Laulima that much before, or at least not for some of the tools, all the tools that we use are highlighted here. Very quick little animations to show them how to use the tools, how to use the various things, so then they can make sure that they know what they're doing uh, rather than being unclear, I guess. Right. So I don't ever want the technology to be a limiting factor. I want to make sure that everyone knows how to use the technology. Everyone knows how to access the tools for them to be able to learn the material, learn the content, and complete the work. And finally, one thing that I do for the course is that I remove unnecessary tools. So I know the Laulima people give you a certain base set of tools, some of which I use, some of which I don't. I get rid of whatever I don't use, and then I hide things that I don't want the students to see. For example, roster, site stats, site info, all those are hidden. So when a student logs on, there's no unnecessary links. There's no nothing there to distract them, so to speak. And it's a small little thing, but I think it's an important thing where I don't want them to sit there and constantly wondering what is this thing and start clicking and getting distracted a little bit. So just what they need is up there, and they only need to see what they need to see. Learner support. So the student I guess the first thing that the student encounters is the syllabus. At least I hope that's one of the first things that they encounter. And the syllabus, as mentioned, has a lot of information about not just this online course, but online courses in general. It allows the student to then go through and really assess for themselves whether they should be taking an online course and then whether they should be taking this online course specifically. One of the things that we have in this course is proctored exams, so they have to go to a testing center, and I want to make sure that they're aware of that right at the beginning, rather than a month into the semester, then they realize that they can't go to the testing center, or they weren't aware of the fact that they have to go to a testing center. So I want all these things to be upfront, make sure that they're knowing what they're getting themselves into. And again, that the micro 130 pledge that I make them sign, so to speak, helps them understand that they know what they're getting into. They're willing to do the work that's going to be asked of them. As far as support, I try to make myself available to the students in as many ways as possible. I post my office, and I tell them straight up that I'm available quite frequently, so they can call me or email me. And email, I think I always tell them email or private message is the best way to get to me. I'm very quick to reply. I tell them 24-hour turnaround, but it's as I see it, I'll start to respond right away, and it never goes more than 12 hours before they hear back from me. I encourage them to come by my office if possible, if they're on campus or if they're on island. And if they can't, then I'll make appointments to get them the phone. And I've talked to various students over the phone for those times. And I also am available via Skype, so I put my Skype name right over here, and I have a Skype account, as well as a link right over here. So right now I'm away because I'm doing this. But if I'm here, let's say I'm what's the word I want to say? I'm open. No, wait. I'm online. So it'll say if I'm available, it'll say I'm online, and then if they have Skype, they just click on that, and then we get connected right away. And I've talked to a few students via Skype. Again, if they're not available, or if they sometimes with the instant message feature, which is not present in Laulima, would be kind of neat if it was. But with the instant message feature, sometimes they'll just shoot me a very quick question. I just have a very quick question about the format for a certain assignment, and bang, I just shoot it right back, and then they get instant reply, no turnaround waiting for email. So I like the Skype option, and I'm not going to say all my students use it, but a number of them are on my Skype list. But the biggest thing is just making sure that I respond as quick as possible. I know some students have complained that they don't hear back from their teachers enough, so that's one of the things I definitely strive. Make sure that I don't let anything fester, no issues sit there and linger for too long. I get back to them as soon as possible, because for me, it seems like a minor issue, but I'm sure on their side, something as simple as when is the assignment due, or can I submit it via MS 2007 instead of 2003. I'm sure that's a huge issue for them, right? So I make sure that I get back to them as soon as possible. Teaching innovation. For Micro 130 Online, I think the biggest innovation is organization. In past, a lot of the course has relied on just throwing the content out there, the old Dropbox where they pick up their PowerPoint slides and the content via the resources, and then just kind of moving on at their own pace, and kind of meandering without really knowing what they're doing, without any type of week-to-week guidelines. So for this course, when we modified it to go to this modular type of format, that really helped clear up a lot. So the students, they knew exactly what to do, knew when to do it, and because we're a very content-heavy course, I wouldn't say ideal for an online course. It presents a lot of challenges. So just by making it like this, where we keep them on task, keep them doing what they're supposed to be doing on a week-to-week basis, without having them to wait till near the end of the semester to submit all their assignments, that has really helped a lot with this course. So any content-heavy course, very important that things move along and that the students are aware of what they have to do. The Cam Studio slash YouTube videos have helped a lot as well. It helps both for giving those mini tutorials, helping them visualize, I think, a little bit of some of the content, um, as well as I've applied it to many different things. Specifically, the instructional tutorials of how to use the various tools. I showed them how to um, upload pictures to their profile, so then we can see them when we're in the discussion. As well as sometimes I've even used it to show various web pages, how to do a web page. Oh no, and how to make the poster. Right? So I think making a poster can be a little bit technical. We give them both written instructions, but again, the Camp Studio helps me show them how to make it. So then I'll walk them through PowerPoint and the various tools that they can use then to build their poster. Um, for the main part, I try to simulate a face-to-face experience as much as possible with the lecture notes, so the inclusion of them writing the lecture notes rather than sitting there reading the PowerPoints or the textbook, which I think it helps, gives them something to do, gives them a bit more active process. And then, of course, availability. I want to make sure that I'm available. Just because we're online doesn't mean that I don't have to be available. I can stay hidden. I'm online a lot. Students have mentioned that they see my name under the users present. And the internet is open 24 hours a day, and I know the students log on mostly in the evenings, so I make sure that I log on at least a few 3 or 4 times at night as well, just to make sure that I'm present and then I can address any issues as soon as possible. Um, Skype was a relatively new thing, so I added that towards the end of last semester and then this semester. And I just started a Facebook page for Micro 130. I'm not really sure what I'm going to do with that thing just yet. But for now, I'm sharing some links, some news that might be relevant to Micro 130. And then hopefully what I want to do is create a micro community. So then because a lot of the micro students are moving on into nursing school, if they maybe keep in touch and then I don't know. I mean, in a perfect world, some of the ones who've gone on to nursing school or in the nursing field can provide guidance to current students. And then maybe I can even use it to contact some of them to maybe come down and share a little bit about their experience. But I think that's a long-term goal, and I think that's still in the formative process.